Welcome to the Military Money Manual Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Military Money Manual Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer, the founder of MilitaryMoneyManual.com and the author of the new book, The Military Money Manual, A Practical Guide to Financial Freedom. On today's podcast, it's part 2 of our chat about FI, or financial independence. And I'm joined this week, as I am every week, by my good friend and co-host, Jamie. Jamie, how you doing today?
Hey, doing well, Spencer. Thank you.
Good. So by the end of this episode, I hope that Jamie and I will be able to fully equip you to start your journey towards FI, or you can be validated in your success so far and encouraged to keep going. This will also serve as kind of an introduction to FI. I think last week we got kind of deep into the weeds with FI calculators, or figuring out what's a good safe withdrawal rate. But this week we're going to kind of break it down for a absolute beginner, and we'll do that with an email I actually received from one of my readers. So before we get too far here, just a reminder: if you're listening to this podcast, we would really appreciate it if you can leave us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to us. It's really helpful for us to get the feedback that we're actually doing well and providing a service, and then it helps other people find the podcast as well. So if you got a second and you're not driving, please, or if you are driving, just pull over and give us a 5-star review right now. Spotify, Apple, thank you. And as always, before we're going to get into a lot of investment talk, and we do this almost every week, but just a reminder, it's not intended to be investment advice. It's for informational and entertainment purposes only. Be sure to do your own research and make your own informed decisions. Neither Jamie nor I are registered investment advisors, nor do we play them on TV or on this podcast. So past performance is no guarantee of future results, but we will talk about some investing strategies that we ourselves have implemented successfully on our own road to financial independence.
Yeah. Spencer, before we jump into that email, just let me do a real quick review of last week's FI basics and the calculators we talked about. Remember, whenever we say FI or FI, that stands for financial independence. And that is simply when you have enough assets or passive income to cover your expenses. FI is a very flexible concept or community, whatever you want to call it. You can retire early, or you don't have to. You can cut back. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be living in a camper van. You can take a break from work and then jump back in. You can change your level of FI from lean to fat or regular and back and forth, for example. Very, very flexible. We talked last week about how you need to aim for 25% of your annual expenses, not your income, but 25% of your annual expenses. And that would be the first goal of achieving financial independence. Go ahead.
25x, 25 times, not 25% of your.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, 25x. Yeah, it'd be nice if I knew how to read. And we talked about how FI is the ultimate goal for all other personal finance goals. Everything else is basically all geared towards getting the freedom that comes with financial independence. And then the last review is you can best affect your increase in net worth and your savings rate. Your savings rate is the best way to increase your net worth, and you can become financially independent within 10 to 20 years of starting. Okay, so now let's jump into our topic today, starting with an email from Kyle. He sent in, "Hi, Spencer. I'm also on active duty and looking to achieve financial independence, but I'm looking for guidance on how to do it sooner rather than later, i.e. when I'm 40, not 65. Some quick facts: he was just about to turn 30. He's an Air Force 03, that's captain, with over 4 years of service, single with no dependents, and getting out of debt at that year. This was not last year, I guess. I'll contribute 8% of my base pay into Roth TSP plus the BRS from the match from the BRS. No other alternate streams of income besides my military paycheck. Planning to separate in the next 6 to 7 years and not staying in for the long haul." He says, "All the financial books I've been reading suggest retirement to be the beginning of financially independent life, and he just doesn't agree with that. I think financial independence can be achieved way sooner than the right plan. That's the purpose of my email." So his kind of the main point here is, can you share how you're going to become financially independent by 40? I've read about stocks and diversified portfolios, maxing out your TSP contributions, Dave Ramsey's baby steps. But again, they all point to retirement being the point in which we become financially independent. And honestly, I don't want to wait till I'm 65 to live that life. I want to have some mini retirements like the 4-hour work week talks about to be my lifestyle. Thanks in advance for your reply. So, Spencer, what would you say to Kyle here? A lot to take in there.
Yeah. So let's I'll just kind of walk through my initial response, and then I might go back into the email as well and kind of break down some of the things he mentioned there. But I mean, I think the biggest thing, right, is he's on the right track. I mean, when you start asking these questions, when you're in, he wrote this email a couple of months ago, and he was still in his 20s. But if you're in your 20s, your 30s, and you start asking these questions now, I mean, that's the perfect time to start doing it,
Yes.
because if you wait until you're in your 40s and 50s, you're not allowing compounding interest to go to work for you for as long if you end up living a standard American life expectancy of 70 to 80 years. But yeah, I don't think there's any reason to wait to be FI until you're 65. I mean, personally,
Right.
my goal was 40, and based on our savings rate, we should be able to beat that goal. So, and I started in earnest kind of at age 25. That was back in 2012. And that was kind of when, to continue the metaphor, the spark was lit on my my fire journey.
Yeah.
But Jamie, do you have a specific age goal, or is it just kind of a number in your head, and whenever you get there, you get there?
Both, I would say. So 45 for us is what I'm looking. I'm under contract a little bit longer in the Air Force, so I know my career is going to take me a little bit longer than what you're looking at. So that kind of plays in, but I'm looking more like 45 as well. And any inheritance I get, I'm trying to do it without that. And like my wife and I, our plan worked. Everything we had set up, and then any inheritance or any other windfalls like that are all just gravy on top, and not to rely on anything coming like that.
Yeah. I think that's a really good way to play it, is like, don't count your chickens before they hatch. If you're expecting an inheritance or any kind of windfall in the future, whether it's like a bonus from work, or if your spouse is going to go to work for a couple of years, until you actually have that money in pocket, don't start saving it or spending it.
Yeah.
And don't expect to have it until you actually have it. And the other thing to consider too, especially if you get a windfall, is there might be taxes involved. There might be fees for lawyers, or sometimes it helps to hire a CPA or a investment advisor to help you out, putting the money to work. So there's going to be, it's not, when you hear that your beloved great aunt passed away and left you $1 million, don't go spending $1 million straight away. Wait until the money's in your account. And even then, actually, on the Bogleheads forum, or on their wiki, they have a really great breakdown of what to do with a windfall. Maybe we should talk about that in a future podcast.
We definitely should. That is a really good breakdown of windfall planning. I've used that a couple times this year. But so I just want to recap, Spencer. You're saying you started your FI journey basically at 25, and so you're looking to accomplish it in anywhere between 9 to 15 years.
Yeah,
pretty impressive. That's really awesome.
Thank you. It's I mean, really though, it's like I said in last week's episode, it's just math. Like if you look at, I have the this chart in the book, Working Years to Financial Independence, under Principle 6, savings rate beats rate of return. And if you look at a 50 to 60%, 60%, you're working about 12 years, and at a 50% savings rate, you're working about 16 to 17 years. And that's assuming, a 6% rate of return. So if you get a better rate of return for that, I mean, if you look at the rates of return that I've had over the last, just since I've been investing, Vanguard last year did 22% just with my two index funds, VTSAX and VTIAX, the total international stock market, and the total stock market fund. So yeah, I mean, it's, all the kind of like savings, you can plan that you're going to be making 7%, but if you happen to start your FI journey in 2011, well, guess what? Like, you had this massive tailwind of the greatest bull market in centuries, pushing you essentially to financial independence. So it's easy, but I caution people too. It's easy to feel like a genius when you're making these 20-30% returns every year just investing in index funds. But to quote Barack Obama, you didn't build that, right? like sure, you had the savings rate and you had the smarts to invest in the index funds, but you also had a lot of luck too, because you could have started investing in 2000, 2001, and you would have experienced 3 years of a down economy, and then 10 years later you have to go through 2008, 2009,
Right.
and the stock market was essentially flat for that entire time. So yeah, don't count your chickens before they hatch, and don't think that you're a smarter investor than you actually are.
Yeah, we've had such a good run recently that it's easy to get sucked into thinking that we're going to just continue to have this forever.
Right.
I have no, crystal ball or whatever, but my hunch is that it's going to not keep up at this pace forever. So right now, if you are getting great gains, that's awesome, but you have to be prepared for the months where it's more flat, or maybe it might even be negative again. Statistically speaking, we will see more of those years in our lifetime. It just is very, very likely to happen. I had a friend text me today. His Roth IRA at Schwab is set up for 2045 target retirement, and his account was up 32% last year in just an easy like target retirement fund, like no work, no day trading, like incredible year. And if you weren't getting above, maybe I'll say 20 on close to the S&P 500 or above that, you probably should reevaluate what you're doing if you're trying to beat the stock market, and you may have lost big time compared to index fund investing this year.
Right. Yep. And that's one of the big takeaways from like the little book of Common Sense Investing by Jack Bogle, is that every year that you just don't meet the average, right? The average return last year, if you were in an index fund, was 20 to 20, 25, 30%. Yeah. Yeah. And so if you're doing, a different investment strategy than that, and every year that you miss out on those gains, I mean, you got to think like, why do I think that I'm smarter than the market? And that's one of the main arguments that I have for investing in index funds is, at this point in my life, I have recognized that I'm not smarter than the market. And I also recognize I don't have the time to spend, researching and doing my own investment allocation. And I think it's harder too, for me, if I don't beat the market, I have no one to blame but myself. Whereas if I just invest in the S&P 500 or a total US stock market fund, it does what it does, and I literally have no control over it.
Yeah. Control what you can and don't worry about the rest, right?
That's right. Yep.
That's another good quote from the book. So we'd like to talk about how saving the first 100,000 is the hardest. So for our listeners who are either at negative net worth or just starting out, why is the first 100,000 so hard? And then why do you pick up so much momentum after that point? And then if you have any tips to get them through that first 100,000 difficult period, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the first 100,000 is difficult for two reasons. One is, especially if you're coming out of debt, you might have to break some habits, and you might have to change a lot of behaviors and lifestyle things that may have served you in the past, right? I mean, like going to college, I needed to borrow money. Now I could have gone to a much cheaper school, and looking back, maybe I would if I had a time machine, I could tell my younger self, hey, like just go to a state school. After you graduate, nobody cares where you went to school. All they care is that you have a degree. And a lot of times,
you hear that, Academy guys?
they don't even care that you have a degree, right? So I think that there's the one thing is the habits and the behavior changes that are necessary to get from a negative or a zero net worth to 100,000. And then the other one is compounding interest. I mean, It's just once you hit that 100,000, if the stock market, like last year, the stock market did what did the S&P 500?
I think it was 28%.
28%. Okay. So $100,000. Let's say you started the year with $100,000, 28%. I mean, at the end of the year, you're ending up with $128,000. So you're already, a quarter of the way to your next $100,000, and you didn't even do anything. That doesn't even consider if you threw $6,000 into your Roth IRA, $6,000 into your spouse's Roth IRA, and maybe you maxed out your TSP as well. So those are the two things that I think make the first $100,000 the hardest, but every $100,000 after that, and this isn't just me. I've talked to a lot of guys,
Yes.
and seen a lot of articles online, people who talk about this. But the time between every $100,000 gets compressed. So if it took you 10 years to get to your first $100,000, it might only take you 4 years to get to your next, and then 2 years, and then 1 year, and they keep
Yep.
compressing. And all of a sudden, it's insane. As housing prices aren't what they used to be. But I remember when I was growing up, you could buy a house for $100,000, or maybe a condo or something, right? And now, once your money snowball starts rolling, and you're adding 100,000, you're adding basically a house to your net worth every year. I mean, that's pretty awesome right there.
Yes, and the momentum definitely picks up big time. We've experienced that as well, so I definitely can validate that. What are some immediate steps that you would have Kyle take kind of in response to this email, or someone in a similar boat where they're interested in FI and starting their journey?
Yeah, so I think he talked about how he was an 03, almost at 6 years of service, single with no dependents. He's going to be out of debt this year. So I mean, that's a perfect place to be to kind of start your FI journey. That was about when I paid off my debt, was about the 6 years mark after entering the service, and I was already a captain. But if he doesn't have dependents, he's about to be debt free. He said he's contributing 8% of his base pay into Roth TSP. And I know that's not maxing it because I've done the math. So if you Google military BRS TSP match, you can see the article I posted that's got the chart. It breaks down, for every pay grade and every time in service, how much you have to contribute to the TSP to max it out by the end of the year. I think for him it would probably be about 25, maybe 30% as a 6-year 03. I'll have to go look it up. But yeah, I mean, that's the first initial step right there, is start maxing out your Roth TSP. So for 2022, it's going to be $20,500 per year. He didn't mention a Roth IRA, I think, in his email. Yeah. So again, right there, start contributing to that. That's $6,000 a year. And then you can always pull out contributions to a Roth IRA anytime you want, penalty free. So, a lot of people talk about building up a gap fund to get you from when you actually, if you retire early, let's say at age 40 or 45,
right,
and then you can't access your retirement funds until 59 and a half for the TSP, 401ks, IRAs, Roth IRAs. But for Roth IRAs, you can pull out the contributions because you've already paid the tax on them, and you can pull out the contributions whenever you want. So right there, if you contributed, let's say you worked from 20 to 45, that's 25 years of $6,000 a year is $150,000. That's a pretty big gap fund right there. If your lifestyle is $50,000 a year, that's 3 years of income right there, and that doesn't even consider that it's going to keep growing as well. So I think that's a big opportunity that he's missing right there by not maxing out his Roth IRA. And then he also talked about, I don't have any alternate streams of income besides the Department of Defense, besides his Air Force job. I think if he really wants to, if FI is a driving goal for him, then he needs to start thinking about, okay, well, how are you going to have additional sources of income? Whether it's in real estate, whether it's in, starting some kind of side hustle. I know lots of guys, I don't know personally lots of guys, but I've read lots of military guys, got into drop shipping and fulfilled by Amazon a couple of years ago. Now, obviously, every time you hear about somebody being successful in that, they're probably trying to sell you some course. So watch out.
There's passive income.
Yeah, exactly. But they're courses right there. So, so I think there's lots of missed opportunities. He didn't mention his TSB maxing that out, his IRA maxing that out. He's still got taxable brokerage accounts he can throw money in. But I think another thing that he needs to be thinking about is what kind of life does he want? What lifestyle does he want? How much does he want to travel? Where do you want to go out to eat all the time? Do you want, a food delivery service that drops off, groceries every week for you so that you can cook at home and, build the life you want and then save for it. That's something I talk about in the book a lot, that, on the journey to financial independence, you should not be miserable. You should not be unhappy, because if you are, you're going to be that when you get to be financially independent. So if your life sucks at the moment because you're saving so much, stop saving so much and go spend some money to make yourself happier. And if spending money doesn't make you happy, well, something must make you happy, right? Like whether it's reading a good book, going for a walk, like exercise, like start doing those things. And, for me and my wife, one thing that we decided last year was we want to spend more money on health this year. And whether that's gym memberships, whether that's, ordering supplies from Amazon to support those various gym memberships, whatever it is, we want to make sure. And like, for instance, I'm building a home gym, and that's costing a couple $1,000s. And so that's an investment, I think, in my future health and well-being. Is it financially optimal? Maybe not, but the point is, to us, health and having a healthy lifestyle is more important than whatever $3,000 invested for 40 years at 7% return would be.
Right. There's got to be a balance there. You hear people talk a lot about the opportunity and lost opportunity of
opportunity cost.
Thank you. Yes, that's the word I was looking for. Opportunity cost.
Economics major.
I'm going to go on a $10,000 vacation. Well, actually, you should put that in a calculator and see what that $10,000 would do for you in 40 years of investing at 7%. It's like, okay, got it. But that there may be a time and place for that. Maybe if it's, do I need a brand new car or, at some point, but you have to do some stuff for what makes you happy, what makes your life better. We talked about before how I pay for lawn service now because it after reading Die with Zero, I got no life joy out of mowing my lawn. And it took me 2.5, 3 hours. And in summertime in Alabama, I was having to cut it every other weekend. So It was like 6 hours a month. And I'm like, you mean I can pay someone $55 every other week to do this? Done.
Worth it.
We also spent several $1,000s in health and wellness kind of equipment this year. And I have never before had more consistent workout routines and health goal progress than we have since spending that money. So great investment overall. And the healthier I am, the more sound I think, the better decisions I make, the better parent I am. So it's not always just about the math. And sometimes if you get really into FI or you're a personality like me sometimes where you learn about a topic and you're all in and almost borderline obsessive, like my poor son is as well, you got to be careful and you got to balance. Hopefully your spouse or a good friend can do that for you if you can't do it yourself.
Yeah, I think it's Ramit Sethi. He wrote "I Will Teach You to Be Rich," and he has the same website as well. But one thing he talks about is living outside the spreadsheet, right? Like once you've kind of like,
my soul was burned by that page.
I know. But once you, for me, it's once you've solved for X, right? Once you realize, okay, it's going to take me this long to become FI, saving this much money, then kind of just set that aside, automate the whole system, and then just go live your life. And if you can't do that, then go talk to a therapist. I don't know, but I think both you and me have kind of come to the same conclusion. We're like, as much as I make fun of you for all your spreadsheets, like I still keep a spreadsheet. I still update my net worth every month. And at one point last year, I thought, why do I do that? Like the numbers go up, the numbers go down. Like it doesn't matter. And so I thought I'm going to take a break. Like I'm not going to update my net worth for 6 months. And at the end of the 6 months, I realized, you know what? It's kind of cathartic. Probably just said
I don't know if that's wrong. A word. I'm not sure.
Let me look that word up. But catharsis? I think that's what I'm going for.
That sounds like an ancient Roman city. I'm not sure.
That's Carthage. Catharsis. Anyways.
Cathartic?
There we go.
Providing psychological relief through the open expression of strong emotions.
Okay, well, it's not. I guess it's not a strong emotion, but
it helped you emotionally.
It did help me to have the knowledge of, okay, this is where my money's at. Like this is how we're doing, my wife and I, financially, and just like it's once a month. It takes me 10 minutes to log into all my accounts, and I guess it's good too, right? Because if I see one account that's like way off, I can check and see like, well, what happened here? Was like money transferred out? Was I hacked? So
did you actually go 6 months? You did it?
I don't think I did. I
didn't know that you did that.
I think I got to like 2 or 3 months.
Okay. That's still, I like when you first start out and like I said, a little obsessive, I was checking it weekly
Yeah.
of like, oh, it went up $20.
Yeah.
And then I would go grocery shopping. Oh, it went down $100. It's like no value added in that at
No,
all.
yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people, especially in the FI community, I've noticed that they do struggle to live outside the spreadsheet. And it might be just those are the kind of people who post a lot online that are kind of obsessive and, they
Right.
calculate they're worth millions of dollars, but they still calculate their net worth down to the pennies. Like that's, if you think about that for a second, it's like, dude, like in a single second in the stock market, your net worth probably goes up and down thousands of dollars, but you're still calculating your net worth down to the penny. It's a bit silly.
There's got to be something
So,
more than that.
yeah.
One other idea for Kyle I wanted to mention was cranking up the savings rate. So we talked last week a lot about savings rate, which is the percentage of your income that you put towards your savings goals, to kind of dumb it down. If he can take his money he was paying towards debt and just take that money, if he doesn't need the emotional victory of spending a little bit more, just take that $550 payment or whatever you were making and put it straight towards your savings goals. That's going to rapidly increase your savings rate. Hopefully you can find more. And one of the best things you can do as you increase your savings rate is paying yourself first every month, no matter what. Pay yourself first, your savings goals, and then if there's a deficit, then you figure out a way to get more income, and that would be the best way to go about it. So that'd be something he should look at, as well as how to crank up the savings rate.
Yeah, I think attacking it from both sides is very powerful, right? Like analyzing your budget, seeing where you're spending money, where you're not getting value from, and then trimming those things. And then at the same time, looking to see, okay, like, do I have stuff around the house? And this is, if you're just starting out in your journey, this can be really powerful. But just looking around your house and be like, okay, what can I sell? What can I get rid
Yep.
of? And that's also, look up like Marie Kondo. But if you're touching something and it's not bringing you joy, then like, why is it taking up your space? Like, why? Your possessions
Just
end up
more
possessing.
clutter.
Yeah, exactly. So I think. I think attacking it from both sides, both increasing your income, decreasing your expenses, and then really saving that gap. And you can, I think for a lot of people, they don't realize like how much money they make until they kind of go through this exercise. And then they see, okay, well, maybe I could save 25% of my income. And then they look at the chart and they're like, holy cow, like I could be, done working in just a few decades. So yeah, I think it's very, and then, if one spouse isn't working and realizes like, oh, if I go to work and we save all of my income and we just keep living off of the other income, maybe we can be financially independent in 10 years. And I think that's really, once you kind of realize that, that's powerful for people. And it can give you a lot of purpose too.
Right. You talked about the gap between your, a lot of times people talk about cutting expenses when it comes time to increasing your net worth or financial independence. And so you'll hear about, oh, if you didn't go to Starbucks every day, you could save up $6,200 a year or whatever the math equates to. All that stuff is great. And there's definitely a place for that, like you said, of cutting. But if you can cut what doesn't add value to your life while also increasing your income, the spouse goes back to work, even if it's part-time, or you pick up a side hustle, or, do odd jobs, sell stuff on eBay, you can get thousands of dollars pretty quickly, the stuff that's just around most people's house that they're not using anymore. And so that widens the gap. You'll hear a lot of people talk about widening the gap. And so that's all very, very good and important advice for sure.
Yep. So a lot of people are hesitant when they're trying to go for early financial independence, from saving into their retirement funds, whether it's, Roth IRA or Roth TSP. And, the first question is, well, how do I get the money out before age 59 and a half? And I don't have an article on my site about it because the Mad Fientist, that's MADFIENTIST.com, or you can just Google how to access retirement funds early. He wrote it. I mean, basically the definitive article on how to access retirement funds early. And I always just point people when they have questions about that.
But the short version is you can take out money. Again, consult a professional. do your own research on this, but currently you can do stuff like taking out $10,000 to buy or build your first house. And the definition of first house is kind of vague. So either your very first or you haven't done it in a while. There's caveats for education expenses, and also anything you contribute, you can take out, like you said. So just make sure to do your research on that one, but it's not locked in there till retirement age, like some people believe.
Right. Right. So, yeah. So as I kind of broke down for Kyle, you definitely don't have to wait until you're 65 to retire or be financially independent. And like he was talking about, he got the idea from the 4-hour work week of taking mini retirements. So maybe working for a couple of years, saving up some money, and then taking a year off and, going hiking or, race motorcycles across Europe or, whatever tickles your fancy. But that's something that you can do on the path to financial independence. And like we've been talking about this whole time about the flexibility, if you're the kind of person who can work a military job for 10 years, buckle down, save 30, 40, 50% of your income, and you come out of the end of that 10 years with $500,000, $750,000, maybe even $1 million if you're an officer and you can really or you have a spouse that makes a lot of money and you can, really put that money away. If you can do that, then you can take them in retirement, right? Like,
yeah.
If you worked for 10 years in the military, you managed to save up $250,000 or $500,000, especially on the E side. I know there's like E4s out there who have saved 6 figures by the time they make E4. And so if they are in the military for 10 years, let's say they make E5 or E6, they get out with $100,000, $150,000. They take their GI Bill, they go to school for 4 years, right? And now they're collecting BAH while they're going to school, and they have this giant 6-figure chunk of money backstopping them. So
Just
if they
growing.
get out, and just growing. And if they get out of college and nobody's hiring because it's 2008 and you mistimed it, just take a year off and go do something else, or go work an apprenticeship or an internship that doesn't get pay. And then all of a sudden now in 2010, when people start hiring again, you're positioned, to capitalize on it. I think a lot of people, they think about, they're like stuffing this money into accounts that they can never access again, but you can. And it's not only can you access it, but if you don't want to access it, at least it's there to kind of backstop you. So you can take risks. And if you mess it up, you have, savings to fall back on. I think a lot of people just, they just don't think about how flexible their life could be if they had $250,000, sitting in an investment fund somewhere, or $500,000. That's, even if let's say your lifestyle was $50,000 a year and the investment returned nothing, 0%. That's 10 years that you can live off of. That's 10, people find jobs in minutes online now. Sometimes they search for months though, but 10 years, I'm pretty sure you could, if you're the kind of person who served in the military, you're usually the kind of person who can kind of pick yourself back up and get yourself on a path towards employment again.
Or the freedom to work on a passion project or some kind of volunteer. My wife, she's a nurse, and so she always wishes, basically she wishes we didn't get married young and we didn't have kids, and she could have done the Mercy ship or the Mercy Hospital. I forget what it's called, but she's like, I always wanted to do that, and I never got the chance. I was like, thank you for now. I carry that guilt around for the rest of my life. But, imagine being able to do that and not having to worry about, like, I can't afford to take a year off work. Or like, yeah, you can. That'd be cool.
Yep. Yeah. That's the freedom and the flexibility that FI gives you when you can, now it's a little bit different if you got, young kids. You can't just abandon them.
That one.
Yeah.
All right, back on track. So obviously we've established now you don't have to wait till you're 65 to retire. You're financially independent when your expenses times 25 equal your invested assets. So 25x of your expenses in your invested assets. And then you could be done working if you want, or you have the freedom to choose, come and go, fat fire, lean fire, regular fire, coast fire, bounce back and forth, whatever you want to do with it. So it's a really solid range if you're between 25 and 33x. We talked a little bit last week about the 4% rule. And so that's kind of similar It is identical to the 25x if you hear people talk about the 4% rule. And then if you hear someone talk about more like 3 to 4%, that's where the 25 to 33x range comes in.
That's right. Yep. And so, like we mentioned last week, the most important factor for rapid financial independence is your savings rate. And it really comes down to, you can't control your investment returns, despite what people might tell you online. Anytime you get increased returns, you're taking increased risk. And so I really don't advise you, if you're on the path of financial independence, it's not the time to go gamble with Dogecoin or whatever cryptocurrency is hot at the moment. It's really, to me, I think index funds are the place to be. Just low cost, long term, simple index funds. They're going to go up some years, they're going to go down some years. You can't really control it, but in general, you're going to end up okay based on the last 100 years or so of history. There's a great calculator at Networthify, and I advise Kyle to take a look at this. But you can put in what your income is, what your expenses are, and it'll calculate what your savings rate is, and then it'll just show you on this like great graph, like, okay, if you can crank your savings rate up a little bit, you'll shave this many years off of working. And when you think about like shaving like years off of working, that can be pretty powerful for some people to have that mental mind shift.
You could potentially, if you're in your 20s and you're looking at like, should my spouse go back to work? That's one example that's easy to use. Obviously, it won't apply to everyone, but if your spouse goes back to work for, say, 2 years at one assignment, it just works out. There's a good job market or whatever. He or she works for 2 years. That's not going to cut 2 years off of your working life. It's by the time you retire, it's probably going to be more like 8 or 10. So it's huge returns on that if you start early. So it can help you understand the why of, like, my wife is back at work right now, full time. She's stepping down to part time because it was a little bit much for us. But the why that we did that is motivating for the nights where it's hard, where I'm at home alone while she's working night shift in the ER and stuff like that. Because it's not easy, but we have a goal, and this is going towards the goal, and it's a temporary period of sacrifice a little bit that's going to pay off in the long run for sure.
Right.
So Spencer, let me transition now to asset allocation. So kind of what do we do with our money, of the sense of, like you mentioned, not necessarily investment advice, or definitely not investment advice, but what have we done that has worked well for us? You actually have your actual asset allocation published online. If you go to militarymoneymanual.com/asset allocation. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you allocate your funds and what your investments look like?
Well, I think the bigger point, we can talk about the percentages, and I'll get into them a little bit, but for most people, unless you really nerd out about this, probably the simplest thing to do is just go to the Bogleheads forum and look up lazy portfolios, and it's going to recommend something like 33% bonds, 33% US stocks, 33% international stocks, and that's it. Just do that, and not guaranteed, but pretty much over any time period, you're gonna do fine. You're not gonna end up like Jeff Bezos, but you're also probably not gonna end up in the poorhouse. So I think going and reading just a couple of simple, like, lazy portfolios. You can look at the Little Book of Common Sense Investing, A Random Walk Down Wall Street, any of those kind of asset allocation books. And they're going to advise pretty much the same thing. Either, like, if you're young, probably like an 80-20, 80% US stocks, 20% US bonds. A lot of people are advising to add some international exposure now. If you look at the total, world economy, the US is about 50% market cap. The rest of the world is about 50%. So maybe a 40-40-20. So 40% US stocks, 40% international stocks, and then 20% US bonds. But like I was saying, like, it's just percentages, right? So I think the bigger point that I want people to do is go do your own research and go read, Meb Faber. He's I think he's a hedge fund guy who really gets into, like, the nitty gritty of value investing or momentum investing, and just, try to understand, okay, like, what am I actually investing in? What is the potential, future of this asset? Like, for instance, if you invested in gold, I think in the last like 10 or 20 years, your money went basically nowhere. And, every year, every decade, there's always some reason, and there's always somebody who's trying to sell gold, who's like, oh, inflation's going to go nuts. It's time to buy gold. Well, just the other thing to do is look at the historical performance of the investment too. And a lot of times you'll discover that there's like, especially for commodities, like they actually tend to go down because guess what? They find more gold and when the supply goes up and the demand stays the same, well, then the price has to come down. That's just, economics, microeconomics 101. So, on a personal, level, I do a 70% US stocks, 25% international stocks, and 5% bonds. And I'm trying to get those bonds a little bit closer to 10% and reduce my US stocks down to 65%. Is this the optimal asset allocation? I have no idea. I don't know. It's what I've settled on. After doing all my own research, I think it doesn't make sense not to own international stocks. It's China is going to be the world's largest economy in probably 10 or 20 years if they're not already. And, when I travel around the world and I see just like how hard a lot of other countries work and like how many people are there, it would be astounding to me if they can't, grow their economy in the next, 10, 20, 30 years. So I don't want to miss out on, not owning Korean stocks or Taiwanese stocks or Indonesian stocks. But I don't want to have to go and pick them all myself. Right. So that's why I just use the international index fund. So, and that, if I was talking to Kyle, that's what I would recommend is just do your own research. And if it all seems too confusing, just do a target date fund. Like you were mentioning earlier in the podcast, what was it up? Like 20 something. It was
like 32%, I think.
Oh, 30. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and like you can go to Betterment or Wealthfront and tell them like what asset allocation you want. You can take these quizzes that'll, show your risk. But the way they define risk is kind of weird, right? Because it's not risk in terms of like, are you going to lose the money? It's how volatile is the investment going to be? Because nobody can guarantee that the investment is going to perform at all, right? Like past performance is no indication of future results. So if you say, oh, I'm very risk adverse, I want it all in treasury bonds. Well, if you bought like 2% treasury bonds last year and inflation's now 6%, you're actually losing 4% a year. So that's a pretty risky investment if you ask me.
Yes. Yeah.
So, the definition of risk is I think is a bit weird in the financial world. But I think if you just stick to, overall, I like to advocate for a LADS, LADS system. And that's low cost, automatic, diversified, and simple. So if your investment meets all those criteria, then go for it. You'll probably be fine. But like I said, just go to the Bogleheads, wiki, look up lazy portfolios. If you look at my website, I talk about how to simulate a total stock market fund in the TSP by combining the C and the S fund. But yeah, that's really all there is to it. Is you can run the back test data on like Portfolio Visualizer or something, but there's the best portfolio is you're only going to know it in hindsight, right? You're only maybe 100%, maybe, this is the year, 2022 is the year to throw it all into international stocks, because guess what? Over the last 10 years, they have way underperformed US stocks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually another thing too. If you, My Money blog has a really good chart on this where they show like every year that US stocks outperformed international stocks, and it's a wave, right? Like, it'll go in like 10 or 15 years, the US is crushing international stocks. And then all of a sudden, 2000, whatever happens, I think it was like 1999, and US stocks are way down. International, like everybody's dumping money into emerging markets. But if you did that for the last 10 years, it was a terrible strategy because the US stock market went nuts. So it's, it's really hard to predict the future. And I think if you kind of cover your bases, and especially if you're younger, you go heavy on the stocks, light on the bonds, and you just put it all into index funds, you're probably going to do all right.
So to summarize, it isn't so much about finding the perfect percentage as to having a good savings rate in low-cost funds like Vanguard, TSP, great options. There's other banks as well that offer low-cost stuff that's great, but low-cost, automatic, diversified, simple. So the exact percentages are not as important as you having a plan and making progress by having a high savings rate. Is that a fair summary?
Right. Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely. And just doing something, right? Like just
I got you to say it. Yes, that was my goal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just, whatever your allocation is, as long as it's not 100% bonds, I'd probably advise against that, especially if you're under the age of like 95. But as long as you have a reason why you went with the asset allocation, and if you don't have a reason why you went with a certain asset allocation, then tell me why you're not in a life cycle fund, right, in the TSP, or tell me why you're not in a Vanguard or Schwab or Fidelity target date fund, because they'll handle it. Just tell them when you want to be retired per se. Or, I mean, there's funds that just do like an 80-20 stock bond split. And guess what? Like that's probably all you need for life. You'll probably do just fine doing that. And they're super low cost. I mean, pennies on every thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
So Jack Bogle likes to say, the winning formula for success in investing is owning the entire stock market through an index fund and then doing nothing. Just stay the course.
Yeah.
End quote. So he was the founder of Vanguard, but so obviously he's a big fan of index funds. But I mean, you go read the books, you go look at the math of like, if the average return in the S&P 500 last year was 28%, that's the average, which means some people made more, 50%, and some people made less, 50%. And for every winner, there had to be a loser. So if you're not exactly on the average, if you didn't make 28% in your portfolio last year, that means you're on the losing side, and that means someone gained. So I think when you put it that way, when people realize that if you're not, like, being average in investing is good. Being average is really good.
Yeah.
And I think our whole life we've been told not to be average, but guess what? I am proud to be an average
Especially
investor.
in the military, that's hard, right? It's like, I got to compete for this. I got to get this award. I got to whatever, blah, blah, blah job. Yeah.
So one thing that I've tried to share on my website, and I actually wrote this back in 2012, was my plan for financial independence in the military by age 40. And it's pretty cool to go back and read it, because I wrote this, like, I think it was worth, negative $46,000 when I wrote it. And yeah, it's pretty neat to go back. And I think I encourage you, if you are thinking about going for FI, and I don't see why you wouldn't if you're listening to this podcast, since we've laid out so many of the, the tactics and strategies that you can use to become FI. But yeah, if you just go to my website and you search for Plan for Military Financial Independence, you can see I lay it out there. And I encourage you to write out your own plan, like put it down on paper. And I did this thing the other day. I think it's called Intentional Path. And so what you do is, it's kind of hocus pocus, but you just pick a time in the future, whether it's, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, and you envision your life at that point. Like, how old are you? Like, do the math, like figure out how old you'll be, who are you with, how old are your kids, how old is your spouse, where are you? Like, what are you doing? What did you do the day before? What are you going to do the next day? And think about that person, and think about, like, how you're going to get there. And I think financial independence is, for a lot of people, like, that is the best way to get there and become the best version of yourself. And yeah, so you can check out my plan that I wrote. This was back in 2012, before I knew probably 1% of all the stuff I know now about FI. But it's still, hey, the plan it's still in motion, and we're still going for FI by age 40.
There you go. One other, or a final kind of comment for Kyle, is you talked about researching and how you learned so much from basically picking up every personal finance book at the library and kind of developing your own plan from that. So a great question to ask Kyle and anyone else who's kind of starting out their journey is what books have you read recently? So any tips you want to point them to for good books they can find more?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, I got to put in the plug, Military Money Manual, Practical Guide to Financial Freedom, available on my website at militarymoneymanual.com/book. You can use promo code podcast for a special discount. But I've tried my best to kind of summarize, I've kind of calculated out, I would say about 4,000 hours of research, almost 2 full years of working, over the last 10 years. And I tried to distill everything that I've learned about achieving FI in the military into this short book. A lot of people have told me they've read it in a couple hours or just an afternoon. Less than 130 pages, I think. Let me see if
119 if you include about the author and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So check out that book. And then a couple other books I'll mention: Psychology of Money, Morgan Housel, really good one. Boglehead's Guide to Investing, good summary of kind of the Jack Bogle flavor of or philosophy of investing. The 4-Hour Work Week, Tim Ferriss, really good. I really enjoyed the book. It's a little bit different than your standard FI book, but it makes you think about a lot of those bigger questions. And for me, it was a huge mindset shift, especially being in the military, where I'm so used to working from, well, at the time it was 12-hour days, 5 a.m. to 5 p.m, 5 days a week, and changing kind of the mindset and getting that mental shift to thinking smarter, I guess. And then Ramit Sethi's I Will Teach You to Be Rich, Jack Bogle's little book of common sense investing, Doug Nordman's Military Guide to Financial Independence and Retirement, Millionaire Next Door. I can't remember the author of that one, but that's a classic. And I would recommend the older one. I think there's a new one written by like his daughter or his son. But the one that came out in the 80s, I think, is the good one. Random Walk Down Wall Street, Burton Malkle. I can't remember the guy's name. And then White Coat Investor is a really good one. And finally, A Simple Path to Wealth, J.L. Collins. And honestly, I think The Simple Path to Wealth is probably one of my top recommended for, again, short reads that just lays out very simply, what is FI and what do I do to get there? And his basic, it turns into about 100 pages of invest in VTSAX. And actually, if you go to his website, I think it's jlcollins.com, or just Google JL Collins. But he's got, let's see, jlcollinsnh.com. He's got the stock series on there. It's really good if you want to deep dive into stocks. He used to be a stock trader himself. But what he realized after, years and years of investing was, hey, just put it in index funds. It's easy. It works. And it really is the simple path to wealth. So, and then finally, I'll add one more. Die with Zero, I think is, we've talked about that quite a bit on the podcast, but that's been a really good one. I would say that's a little bit more advanced. Maybe wait until you're kind of on your journey to financial independence before you dive into that one. But yeah, I just gave you if you read one of these books a month for the next year, you would come out at the end of the year, probably ready to write your own book on financial independence. So,
your best year ever, probably.
Yeah. I think you'd really, really accelerate all your goals by reading those books. So, but let's say you read all those books, Jamie, you save and invest wisely in index funds for the next 15, 17 years or so. Now you're financially independent. What's going to happen? What's going to change? What would you tell Kyle it's going to be different about his life if he goes on this path to FI and reaches it before 45?
I don't really think life is going to change much. It's not like I'm going to throw a party and have everyone over, post on Facebook status like, I've achieved my FI. I got 25x my annual expenses. It's just another day. But what it does is, I think the emotional victory, psychologically, it's going to be like a big sigh, like, we made it. And that just knowing that I can choose now. And if I don't like what my job is trying to do to me, or, if I'm still in the military at that point and I'm not under contract and they try to send me on a 365 and it just isn't right for my family, and I can have options. And so I think the knowing you have freedom is a big psychological win, but it's not like I'm gonna sell, all my stocks and then go buy a beach house or anything like that. Life's still going to be the same. And if I'm a mean person now, I'm still going to be a mean person then. If I'm generous now, I'm still going to be generous then. So it's not really going to change anything about who you are or who I am. It's more of just knowing now that you have the freedom to choose, I would say.
Yeah. Madfientist.com. He achieved financial independence a couple of years ago, I think 2016, 2017. And he put off a lot of stuff while he was on his journey to FI because he thought, well, once I'm FI, I'll do those things. And then he became FI and he realized, oh, I don't want to do those things. Or like the reason I wasn't doing those things wasn't because I wasn't FI, is because like I had other psychological issues going on. So yeah, just like Jamie was saying, like no matter where you go, there you are. So you're going to take all of your, insecurities and all of your problems with you, both on the journey and to the destination. And when you get there, like if you're not the person you want to be, like start working on that now, so that when you get to FI, you're ready to be the person that you want to be. Madfientist.com/Bogleheads interview is the podcast he did. He actually did with Morgan Housel, and he talks about life after FI. And I thought he's done a couple actually. I think he does annual updates on his life after FI, and I think it's really good to see someone who's like kind of crossed that barrier into the afterlife, into paradise. Yeah. And what they report back, it's not all rosy, right? There's a lot of existential angst. So
it's still life, right?
It's exactly like, yeah, it's still life. So,
all right. Well, Spencer, I think we're getting towards the end. Before we go, I just want to mention one thing. We were kind of planning to do a series on FI, right? We kind of mentioned we were going to start a series as part 2, but actually we're kind of bored with FI because FI is boring. Like we just talked about it for almost an hour, but FI is boring because it's automatic. It just runs based off decisions you made years ago. And it's not a sexy style of investing at all, but it works. So we're going to not continue a series in FI at this point. We'll wrap up this episode here in a second. But if you do have questions about FI or any other more specific topics you want us to talk about, we can always answer a quick FAQ at the beginning of a different episode. But you can message on Instagram, Military Money Manual, or email info@militarymoneymanual.com. And before I pass it back to you for your closing thoughts, I want to just read a couple lines from page 23 of your hymnal that just kind of motivates and wraps up today's conversation in a really nice way. So do yourself a favor and start now. But remember, a high savings rate can overcome a late start. It's never too late to start. The best time to start investing was yesterday. The next best time is today.
Yeah.
That's deep.
I like that.
I underlined it and start it in my book. That's how
I got a star too.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'll close with a quote actually from The Psychology of Money, which is actually how I closed the Military Money Manual, because I thought it was a good summary. Quote, "The highest form of wealth is the ability to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want is priceless. It is the highest dividend money pays." All right. With that, listener, good luck on your journey to financial independence. We'll see you next week on the Military Money Manual podcast. Hey guys, it's Spencer again. Before I let you go, I want to let you know about my new book. It's called The Military Money Manual, A Practical Guide to Financial Freedom, and it's available right now at militarymoneymanual.com/book. This is the book I wish someone had handed me on my first day in the military. In this book, I cover the exact money tactics, investing strategies I use on my path to financial independence before age 40. I break down the math of FI and I explain the exact dollar amounts you need to retire. The book is full of easy to apply financial advice specifically for military service members and their families. I cover tax-free deployments, the thrift savings plan, and many more topics only military personnel can relate to. This book was written specifically for you, whether you're active duty, guard, reserve, a military spouse, enlisted, or officer. Both E's and O's will benefit from the lessons in the Military Money Manual. If you're in the Army, Navy, or Air Force ROTC, or if you're a cadet or midshipman at West Point, Naval Academy, and the Air Force Academy, this is the perfect book to start your military career with. Again, the book is available right now at militarymoneymanual.com/book, an audiobook, ebook, and my personal favorite, the hardcover book. The hardcover book was printed right here at home in the United States of America, and it will look great on your bookshelf. So check it out. Let me know what you think. And remember, podcast listeners can use promo code PODCAST to get a special discount. It's called The Military Money Manual, A Practical Guide to Financial Freedom, and it's available right now at militarymoneymanual.com/book. Thanks for listening.